So, does taking notes actually do anything? That's the question I asked myself when I received my midterm grade first semester of university. I did not do well, despite having studied hard. By studying hard, I meant I took notes religiously and fanatically. I was obsessed with writing down everything the professor said and making my notes pointlessly aesthetic. Taking notes just felt good. It gave me the feeling of studying. Problem was, I never reread my notes because they kind of sucked. The lack of structure, the inclusion of totally trivial and useless details, the lack of connection between concepts, all these rendered my notes a shallow piece of trash, all look and no substance, whose only purpose was to serve as ramen leads. So I started going note free. I started relying more on active recall techniques like doing practice questions, doing flashcards, etc. You know, what the cool study tubers do, and it's been working pretty great. So I realized that note taking is useless because it's just a repetition of what's already in the slides and it doesn't blend in with these other more effective techniques. However, later on I discovered a note-taking method that not only complements active recall, but even elevates it and takes studying to the next level. How I discovered it was completely by accident. Once I had to prepare a cheat sheet for an upcoming quiz, but I had forgotten to bring a notebook. The only thing I could write on were some napkins. I know there was the other option, which was to ask strangers for a paper, which I couldn't do because I'm
socially awkward.
So I chose to write on my napkins, and holy cow, it opened a new world for me. What makes it different from a normal note-taking experience is that first, the napkin surfaces usually come folded, so you always have one side laid out in front of you and the other side concealed at the back, which makes for a perfect tool to practice active recall. And secondly, because the space is relatively limited compared to a normal notebook where you have almost unlimited pages to write on, you're kind of forced to only pick the important things. So you end up with condensed and concise info, which can be extremely helpful for exam preparations. Thanks to this method, I was once able to absorb 10 chapters of textbook material in just 2 days and redeem my grades after that disastrous midterm. So I hereby introduce this bizarre yet shockingly useful napkin note method. Now, I understand that many of you may still be weirded out by this whole idea of writing on tissues. Me too. So I only use it at home when nobody else can see me. In class, I opt for an alternative A4 paper. We just need to fold it horizontally and vertically so it divides into 4 areas, similar to how napkins are folded. So I've been using a mix of the two throughout uni. For example, these are some of my notes for math, calculus, GMAT math, etc. And these A4 paper are my notes for my business law class. Let's demonstrate how to use them to take notes for different subjects. First, we have memorization-based subjects such as biology, business law, etc. I always found note-taking for these type of subjects tricky because they often involve detailed, wordy facts and explanations, so it's easy to fall into the trap of just rewriting the slides or textbook. So to avoid that, I want my notes to not just be boring logs, but act more like a self-testing tool. Here, I basically use the Cornell method layout. The right surface is my note-taking area, so this is where I write my actual notes. The left surface is the Q column, where I put keywords and self-testing questions. Personally, I like to add little twists and create 2 columns, one for keywords and one for questions. But this is completely personal and optional. Now, because the paper is folded, when I read my cues, my notes/answers are hidden at the back, so it's a perfect setup to practice active recall. It forces me to make an effort to answer the questions before flipping over to check the answers. Plus, because this is so foldable and portable, it makes for a perfect tool for spaced repetition as well, because you can literally carry it anywhere, whether be it on the bus, while waiting in a line, in the toilet, or even while stuck on a loading screen playing League of Legends. I remember once on a bus, I was able to go over 3 chapters of content just within that 30-minute bus ride. Alright, next we have liberal arts subjects such as international relations, history, etc. These used to be my least favorite subjects in freshman year because in exams you have to write this long-ass essay on the spot. And I was like, I cannot even write an essay in 2 weeks. Now you expect me to write in an hour? Of course it's going to be crap. My exam writing is like mental diarrhea, just mindlessly spilling random info that I remember from the readings with no transition, no coherence, and no logical connections between my points. And I feel even more like a loser considering the fact that these exam questions are more or less predictable. Usually we're given a historical or current world event and we need to write about either what caused the event or its implications based on scholar opinions from the readings. For example, scholar A could argue that racial justice played a decisive role in the American North versus South divide in the 1860s, whereas scholar B would argue that it was mainly caused by economic reasons. And the exam question will basically ask what you think of these opinions. Since I could kind of predict the exam question, to avoid writing garbage again, why not get my thoughts pre-organized before the exam? And here's where we can really leverage the power of napkin notes. Each surface will represent one type of opinion. On top, I will summarize the main argument/thesis of said opinion. Then I will write the supporting points. Then I will look at all the opinions holistically and try to find connections, how they complement or contradict each other. Then I use this as a speech script to do a back and forth debate with myself. The North was enlightened on the moral dangers of slavery, so they fought against the South to end it. Wait, hold on. But in Lincoln's inaugural speech, he declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it existed, that his goal was to preserve the Union, not to free slaves. Eventually, I come to a conclusion as to which opinion is the strongest. I find this exercise super helpful because it's basically like a verbal mock exam. Not only does it help me memorize, it helps me find coherence so that my essay won't be all over the place during the exam. Lastly, we have practice-based subjects such as math and physics. By practice-based, I mean we need to actually solve the questions ourselves. Memorizing notes isn't enough to get good grades. So while note-taking, my focus is not to make my notes look pretty, but rather make it useful. So I use a cheat sheet style layout. I draw a little box here. This is where I write my title. Then I draw a line here and here. The two cells above are summaries of the chapter. The left cell is for key concepts and theories, and the right cell is for formulas and equations. Then starting from the area below, I'll be writing down sample questions. For now, I put down only the questions, not the solutions. If this space below is not enough, just continue on to the next surface. Now, by sample questions, I mean the types of questions that are likely to be on exams. Some may ask, well, how do I know? Here's my personal tier list. So the best kind of questions are questions from tutorial classes or something like to call the TA sessions. In my school, we had these once a week to complement the lecture. I find these tutorial questions have a really high chance of being on the exams. It may not be the exact same wording or the exact numbers, but the gist is the same. But what if I skip these tutorials? Well, borrow your friend's notes. But what if I don't have friends? Well, you're just like me for real. In that case, we can opt for the next best option, questions from lectures. The reason why I rank these lower than tutorial questions is because the quality is not always stable. Occasionally, you get that hipster prof who goes off tangent and doesn't follow the syllabus. In that case, there is the next option available, textbook questions, basically questions in between the text where they have explanations of steps. Now, I like to combine all of the three sources to get that really inclusive range of exam questions, and I do what I call question type grouping, which is grouping together questions that test the same exam point, as opposed to having all tutorial questions together and all lecture questions together. For example, for calculus, I will group together this question from the tutorial and this question from the lecture, because they test the same concept, which is calculation of limits. This is beneficial in training my brain into recognizing patterns, because what I fear most in math exams is acting like a clueless fly, not knowing which formulas to use as I cannot recognize what the question is testing. By grouping together questions under the same exam point, my brain can recognize that testing pattern much better than scattering my focus randomly between multiple exam points, so that in exams I immediately know what the question is asking. Alright, now that we have our sample questions, let's flip to the back side and write down the solutions. So what we have is a perfect setup to practice active recall. When I go over the questions, because the answers are concealed at the back, I'm forced to map out the steps in my head before checking the solution. Lastly, I would like to talk about one small simple trick that we can pull with napkin notes. During my 16 years of being a student, I've discovered that for almost every subject, we would encounter these pairs pairs of similar yet different concepts that can be easily confused with each other. For example, in biology, there is mitosis versus meiosis. In political science, there is the concept of nation versus state. In French grammar, there is the passé composé tense versus the imperfect tense, etc., etc. These are what I like to call the fake doppelganger concepts. Now, if we just open up our napkin, we will see that it's naturally divided to two surfaces. So why not write down the two concepts side by side and compare them? Here I'm using nation versus state as an example. So on top, I write the title, nation versus state. Then I start off by putting the similarities between the two in the middle, shared by both areas. For example, we have both can establish courts, borrow money, collect taxes, make and enforce laws, spend money on the central welfare. Then in the area below, I'll be writing down the individual notes, which basically serve as their differences. This type of note structure allows us to very clearly and easily observe the two concepts and compare them. That's about it for this video. I hope you find it useful. Thanks for watching.